for construction in vicinity of oil well is a cheat sheet or simplified version of what the ordinance is all about. All the technical stuff that could not fit in the ordinance is being detailed and put, as you can see, bullet points, easy to read. Project review phase, what does it take? Project construction phase, what does it take? What is a pre-construction meeting is all about? What do we expect to go through inspection, post-construction, all spelled out in this bulletin that's now readily available on city website for the development community to read and become familiar with. Then the bulletin also get to some details about vent risers. The bulletin is a 22-page and has some standard details that inspection team will look in the field. So the cone venting of the pipe, vertical riser against building details. All these details that architect and engineers, they may be having questions and how to handle. Now they are prescriptively developed in this bulletin, and we highly encourage, even the signage, we highly encourage to follow these 4 details and include them in your drawings. Towards the end, there is a document that we call indemnification and covenant. It's a combined document that when a project is done and ready, developer submits this to the city attorney for blessing. It gets recorded on the title of the project and becomes a part of the project. So for future owners and for future developers and protection of the citizens of the Long Beach, this document is critical. When it's signed and sealed and done, city will send this notice that the project was prepared properly and the development construction for building can start. We also have fees listed on this bulletin for developers to anticipate or budget themselves for any aspects of their work. If we can move to the next slide. Yeah, at this junction, another big part of this process that we develop that's very helpful to our staff as well as to the public and design community, and we want to make sure the design community, the development community are familiar with this and use this public tool, is our GIS layer, oil well GIS layer. Can we move to the next slide? We will explain, Jenna will explain that in a few minutes, the details about the GIS oil well level. But before even getting there, we have included this well for you, for our audience, to hear and see what we are experiencing and how serious things can be. These are pictures that have been taken not too long ago from the oil well sites that we deal with. As I mentioned, the oil wells could be abandoned, the CalGEM standards. Those are the golden, those are the best wells. Sometimes cost a lot to get a well to that level. Then we get to the abandoned to the previous CalGEM standards. Those are the ones that they come to us for processing. Then we get to non-abandoned, idle, and active. But let's listen to a video that was taken on a top of an oil well when they do the water testing. And that's the slide on the left-hand side. Those of you may see or may hear it, these wells are bubbling. What that means is the methane or SH2, which is a pretty potent gas, is being emitted from these oil wells. So abandonment of oil wells, dealing with oil wells is nothing that the city takes cursory. And this picture was put in because it's a real picture of what we experienced in the field. When the well has to be abandoned, then obviously a rake has to come in, has to get installed, and that's the video that you see on the right-hand side. It's a short video that shows you, or you may hear it, that shows what it takes for a developer to commence abandoning a well. This process is very could be considered very expensive, very laborious, and time-consuming. So we like the developers who work on the oil wells to submit the projects early on. So if they have to mitigate the well by any means, there is enough time in their development program so they can achieve this. We have noticed, for instance, sometimes this process took a developer about 1.5 to 2 years. We had to work with some developers to make the construction in tandem or in conjunction at the same time as the wells around the projects were getting abandoned. So one of the points to deliver here for the development community, engage with us very early in your process and don't wait to the end. We can move to the next slide if we are ready. I think we jump 2 slides. Yeah, this is the development at 2nd and PCH. This was 2 years ago, 2019, 2018. This project started. Very conscientious developer worked with the city to convert the land to a very robust shopping center. There were about 5 or 6 wells that they fully abandoned to the golden level, to the CalGEM state standards. There were a lot of difficulties to get around it. The city had to work with the developer to allow construction to go around, as were they abandoning the oil well. But because they worked very closely with us, we were able to work very closely with them to the end. And as you can see in the next slide, now that shopping center is a very robust shopping center at a very prominent corner of this entryway to the city of Long Beach. You all have seen this center, and it has been open at least for 2 past Christmases. If you don't mind, if you can move to the next slide. At this juncture, I'm going to ask Jenna to assist me and take it from here.
All right, thank you, David. So I'll be going over the web application. And could you go back to that PowerPoint, please? And I'm going to show you how you can turn on the oil wells layer so you can actually see where the wells are located within the city of Long Beach. So as you can see, the link here is to the web application. This is also shown in the bulletin, and you can also access the web application through the city's website. So could you please go to the city website? Thank you. So the city's website is www.longbeach.gov. At the home page, on the right side, there's different tabs. Third from the bottom, there's the planning and building. So you want to click on this. And what it does is it directs you to the development services page. At the top right, hover over the maps and you'll see the methane gas zone GIS map. Once you click on it, it'll open up a new tab and it'll direct you to the web application. The first thing that you're going to see is the disclaimer. The disclaimer is regarding about the data that's being used within the web application and also the terms and conditions. So you'll need to read the disclaimer, click on I agree to the above terms and condition, and press OK. And once you press OK, you have access to the application. So this is the methane gas mitigation and oil well app, and there's multiple purposes regarding this application. For this presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick overview of the application and how to turn on the well layer. In the next presentation during the methane gas mitigation session, I'm going to go more in depth regarding the widgets, the different functionality, and how to use the search functionality as well too. But again, for this, it's going to be a quick overview. So to start off with, the majority of the application is the interactive map. This is where you're going to see all the GIS layers. On the left panel, there's different widgets from left to right. This is the About widget, where it kind of tells you about the description of what each icon does. The second is the check location, where you can actually search for the locations that you're interested in by address, APN, and coordinates. The third is the legend to help you understand what these layers mean. So the pinkish red that you see right here, this is the methane gas mitigation zone. The black outline that you see is the city boundary. The fourth widget is the layer list. This is where you can actually turn on and off the layer on the map. By default, there's multiple layers that are already turned on. So I'm going to turn off these layers because this is for the methane gas mitigation. And for the well layer, it's grayed out right now, but this is the CalGEM wells. If I click on it, this well layer is being pulled from CalGEM, California Geologic Energy Management. It's state data, and it's using the same legend as what they are using. So it's the same symbology, and it's the same description. What you'll need to do is you need to click on the check mark next to it. And as you can see, even though I checked it, it doesn't show on the map because we have it configured where you have to zoom in to a specific extent in order for the wells to show up on the map. So I'm going to zoom in. Now that I zoomed in, that you see the wells located on the map, you can actually see the layer list to see what these symbols mean. You can actually click on the well as well too to see additional information that CalGEM offers. Additionally, we also have the sister parcels information in the background as well too. So if you want to look at the APN number and more information, you can actually just click on the parcel. So again, for the well layers to turn on, it's under the layer list. And click the CalGEM wells and make sure that you zoom in order for the well to pop up in the map. Lastly, we have the base map where you can actually change the background of the map. You can do a dark gray canvas if you want. You could also do imagery, or if you like the default extent, you can actually go back all the way to the bottom and there's a topographic. And that was a quick overview of the web application, and we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, and David will be talking about the next slide.
Thank you, Jenna. The next slide, I'll talk the process summary, but before going in here, I want to encourage all participants to send your chats, your questions, participate in the presentation so we can engage you more and respond to your questions. I see about 30 people listening to us, but we like this to be a two-way dialogue, even though it's virtual, you can communicate with us. What Jenna just mentioned, I want to re-emphasize that if it was too quick and you didn't get the chance to understand it completely, we really like to push this GIS system out and have public use it, or architect, engineer, the design community. This is a lifesaver. You have a lot of information that has gathered for you by the city technology and innovation and GIS people, thanks to Jenna, for organizing this for you. So take advantage of it and use it. And if you have questions, you can either contact me, Jenna, or we'll be able to provide you more information. But getting to the actual, the body of the ordinance and the bulletin, most of you know that in past and to this day, the project, oil abandonment project, needs to be submitted to the state for their blessing. California Geologic Energy Management Division, CalGEM, is the primary resource to evaluate the wells. And these wells are sometimes 12,000 feet deep, 10,000 feet deep. So they have an intimate knowledge about the oil wells in the area. They evaluate the oil wells abandonment procedures, and they will receive a construction site well review CSWR application from applicants. They evaluate their proposed abandonment, and then they come back to the well status level, WSLR. These abbreviations are used in industry. So sometimes when the developer receives a WSLR, the well completely meets the state standards and they're golden. That's what we like to say in the city. Sometimes the WSLR says, no, you don't meet our current standards. At that junction, a developer can now turn to the city of Long Beach and go through this alternate process that we are proposing. The alternate process, which we refer to as the Long Beach Equivalency Standard, we started upon receiving of the WSLR letter from the CalGEM. In other words, developers, they still have to go process of submitting to state. They can't directly come to the city. All the information submitted to the state, and if they receive rejection or they receive not an approval, then comes to us. So we have all that information, and then an application for a peer review gets submitted to the city. City has a system of hiring a peer review consultants who become our experts. These companies who I know a couple of them have joined this presentation at this time, they're listening to this presentation, they are our set of eyes and experts in the area. So whatever is proposed by the development community or developer goes through their microscope, goes through their reviews, and then they come back with the evaluation and their suggestion to the city. That suggestion from the peer review is considered by my office. We can go to the next slide. And the ordinance referred to the city development coordinator or designee. That's basically the building official office and the staff that they work with me. We will take the recommendation from the peer review company under consideration and make sure that the developer meets those standards as a minimum. If the developer meets those standards and agree and pushes in getting those mitigation measures done in the field, then a qualified professional engineer hired by the developer, work for the developer, who needs to be a qualified petroleum engineer, registered in the state of California, which has an experience in oil well abandonment, will oversee the entire abandonment process in the field. Sometimes they do that by means of using deputy inspectors, hired inspectors, or sometimes within their own staff. They make sure that all those blocks or all those plugs that were agreed upon or all the mitigation measures are put in place by the developer, and then at the end they certify the job. I'm raising my hand to make sure you understand. The certification comes under their liability and comes under their responsibility to the city, and it's upon them to verify things. We provide inspectors, we go to the job site, we continue to support the developer, and ultimately we receive that certification from a developer's engineer, which the ordinance referred to as a qualified professional engineer. We can move to the next slide. We also want to bring you some examples of the several projects that we recently experienced, and I'm going to turn to Zeke Rincon to take you guys through the experiences that we have recently had with several major jobs. And I want to qualify, these have been all very positive experiences, but they came about as working closely with the developers. Rick, take it from here.
Thank you, David. I'd like to ask the audience if the audience likes to see pictures. Personally, I do. And I'd like to direct your attention to this picture as I narrate what title 1878-040 requires from the consultant, developers, owners. So this picture reflects what is required by the prerequisites. Item number B, identify all well idles, abandoned wells within the project boundary, and all offsite active idle wells. So this site is showing eight wells. Now, how do we know this? Well, in the construction site well review that was received from CalGEM, they describe the wells and status of the wells. Okay, so in the inspection process, it is required to verify the location of the wells. So a pre-construction meeting to determine location of the wells, finding the wells, also the installation of a vent cone and cone venting is discussed in the pre-construction meeting with the contractor and anyone that is involved. Normally this happens at the rough grading inspection. And for this site, 6 of the wells were found during the rough grading process or phase. And it took more time and very, very conscientious effort from the contractor to find the additional 2 wells. One of the wells that is in the middle of this parcel, mark grade number 5, was found eventually, and abandoned to the standards of CalGEM, previously known as Dogger, and Macadam, the wall just above. It was located under city utilities, and therefore the proposed, or the qualified professional proposed a mitigation measure for this well, since the utilities were in the way. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, now this other picture shows the location of the proposed structures, an office building and a open garage with some wells under the structure. So interesting for this type of development, there is a requirement to uncover the wells, abandon the wells if not compliant to CalGEM standards, to city standards, which is the equivalency to the CalGEM standards. And we'll be going over the requirements of the abandonment process, also how the vent cone will be installed and inspected as we move to this training. But for right now, I'd like to pay attention to location of these wells. On the northwest corner, we see two wells. Right in front, on the north side of the proposed building, another well. And on the south side of those buildings, we're seeing 3 wells, and which will require some sort of mitigation and also venting system outside of the footprint of the buildings, and we'll go over that. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so this slide in the inspection process has identified, is after the wells have been identified, permit is issued, and the vent cone system is installed. We have 2 pictures. The picture on the right is showing the installation of a vent cone. This diagram shows the vent cone, shows the horizontal venting, and also the vertical riser termination up and off the roof of a structure. But pay attention to the vent cone, which is the grayish area, sort of a triangular shape. Right under this cone, there is a pipe. It looks in a greenish color, which is vented to the outside, but right above, straight up, you'll see a black line that goes through some structures. Well, the portion right above it, the whitish portion, those are black outs that were proposed for this system. That will be to permit for a future abandonment. However, now the venting doesn't go straight up, goes on a horizontal direction, and then it takes off on a vertical direction. We'll go over those requirements also that will be inspected during the installation process. And on the picture on the left is showing another vent cone and also venting system to the structure. Now, this is a multi-level parking structure that we'll be going over eventually. Now, I'd like to direct now your attention to the picture where the ladder is in a trench. Okay, now, during the inspection process, it is important to determine location of the well and where it's going to be terminated. Now, following the prescriptive method that the city just approved under 18.78, from the vent cone outlet, in a Schedule 40, normally Schedule 40 PVC pipe, ABS pipe is connected and in this case, is taken off horizontally to where it's going to be terminated to a location of a flagpole. Now, if we just see the picture, it may not tell us much, but during the inspection process, there are a few items that will be inspected, and it will facilitate the process of inspection and construction to backfill that trench, and I'll go over those items. One of them is identify the pipe, what type of venting system is, and this is for a methane mitigation system, and that's what the yellow stripe is marked on the vent. Now, the second requirement is also to run a 14 gauge wire, tracing wire, and the item number 3, which is also important, to maintain a 1% slope upwards starting from the point of connection of the vent cone to the termination of the flagpole. The flagpole will also be inspected, and there are a few items that will be interacting. So for the flagpole, the importance of after the installation of the flagpole is to have it grounded. If it's a metallic portion that may be electrically energized at any point, therefore it needs to be grounded, and that needs to be communicated at an early stage of construction to the electricians that will be installing that. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, now we saw a satellite view of the parcel prior to the rough grading inspection. Now this is how the office building looks like. There were a few things that were encountered during construction, and it's just a reminder to anyone that is in the industry in constructing over oil wells. Any revisions to approved details will have to be submitted to the city for review and approval prior to the installation of any components of the methane mitigation system. That's what happened to this building. If you can see now, this building is looking a lot different, and it makes me very happy that I see something that is being taken care of from point, let's say from A to Z. We're getting close to Z, and from here, we're going to direct to the PowerPoint to David.
Yeah, let me start on this picture. Can we go back one more? You see architecture in a very comprehensive building. This building, because it's built around a lot of oil wells, had to have certain setbacks, vertical and horizontal setback, to allow access for the rig in future. Zeke quickly showed you some details about the parking structure behind. The parking structure behind, the rig can climb on top of parking structure, and there were access panels on each floor that could reach and abandon the wells in future if there is any eruption. But when it comes to architectural work also, it takes a lot to develop a building around oil wells. In summary, there are 3 things that we want to emphasize for the development community to remember. First order of business was what Jenna established, a GIS system and identifying the location of wells. The second message was what was introduced by Zeke here, and that's locating the wells, having enough access around the wells for future. So you may have to come up with a very complex geometry like this, of a building. And the third item is down the well, down the hole, the plugs that we are anticipating and we are looking for. Now we can go to the next slide. The fossil peer review and expertise that we really need is what happens underground. 10,000 feet underground with the wells. That's the kind of expertise that is different per location, per well, and they're not 2 wells similar to each other. On the surface, the well could be abandoned with name and all that. But what happens down there is a completely different story. Each well, as we will show, has a name and has an ID, but has its own history, like any human being, or like any natural species. So when they were driven, how they were abandoned, how they were left alone, are they still active? It's like a entity or individual with 100 years of history, each well. So we don't take it cursory. Each well profile information comes in, gets submitted to an expert. The expert will review this report and develop their recommendation. So it's a very, very specialized work that we, as a city, we have to go to an expert to do that kind of evaluation for us. But we work in conjunction with the peer review expert. The developer pays for the cost of this review, and then when the review comes in, the review gets submitted to the developer for their consideration and for the implementation. But let me say, all peer review or equivalence standard is the minimum standards that city expect from the developers to happen in a field. We deal with at least 3 plugs that are mandatory to be installed. One has to do with the last hydrocarbon producing layer. That plug needs to be satisfactory and right. Then we get to the plug that's in the mid-range and it's on top of the water table to make sure the water table of the cities don't get contaminated because of some kind of geological movements and eruptions. And then the well on the top that we will show you more pictures and more diagrams as far as how to cone it and how to vent it. All that process of looking at it down the hole and above the hole and how it applies to the building and rig access is what the peer review company will do for the city, well by well. We can move to the next. Now, after the peer review is done, obviously, as far as the city is concerned, we have some office work to do. We have the application to process, create the folder, authorize the peer review based on the city purchasing guidelines. And it takes a little while to put that all in place for a project. Then the peer review consultant needs time to do their evaluation of the proposed mitigation. And as Zeke showed you, some projects may have 7 or 8 wells. So this takes time to really consider, and sometimes there's an interrelationship between these wells. Some are halfway abandoned, some are fully abandoned, some they cannot be accessed. We get into the project at that time. Well, when the plan is in place, then project goes to construction, the field review and field work starts. Zeke and his team and his people and our inspection group, they hold a pre-construction meeting in the field, explaining all the expectation, requirement for the testing, and monitoring of these wells. It all will be discussed. Each oil well needs to be tested. There are procedures for testing, and the testing needs to happen under supervision of our building inspectors. So the testing cannot happen because of the details involved in testing. For instance, we don't want testing to be done after the soil has been tossed around too much. We don't want to see the testing done when it's windy time and we can get right measurements by the equipment. There's a lot of concern about the testing and coming up with a correct result on each well. Then at the end, when the project is done, there is that process certification that I spoke about already by the project qualified professional. By that time, all the work with underground of the well and below the grade level is done. And then we get onto the oil well cone and above ground and what basically is the final finale for the oil well abandonment. Oil well abandonments technically are supposed to finish before any grading permit and building permit can be issued. This is a point of concern for the development community because obviously time is money and projects have to proceed. And we've been working with the different developers on that item. But please plan on finishing your abandonment before you can go with a speedy grading project and a building project. Otherwise, they will impact each other. Next slide. At this time, we are ready for Zeke to share with us some of his actual field experiences. Zeke, take it from here, please.
Thank you, David. Going back to those pictures, and we're going to see a small video, two videos. So first of all, I'd like to go over that one of the prerequisites prior to issuing a building or grading permit, it's a leak testing. So for section 18.78.110, a leak test should be requested to the development coordinator, and the development coordinator will require some items. I'd like to go over what is required prior to setting up an inspection or an appointment for a leak test. So first of all, the development coordinator will require the name of the firm or the qualified professional that will be testing the well, and the testing normally will be conducted visually and also with a sensor. So the sensing device or gadgets that will be used, we need a description, method of testing, qualifications of the individual that will be conducting the leak test, and it'll be required also to provide it's a bomb test certification of the testing device. So now with that, at the date of the testing, those devices will be verified according to what was submitted previously to the city. And what we're seeing in the picture on the left side, this device is a sensor device that will be testing methane in units of ppm. What I like to direct you right on the screen, you'll see that it's going to show a reading after a very strong beep. So if anyone is sensitive to the beeps, please cover your ears. You will still hear it. But don't close your eyes. Look at the screen, and it's going to move from 0 to a number. So can we play the video? I guess the beat was not too strong today, but it was before. So we are seeing that there's a reading of 100 ppm, parts per million. So that reading gets recorded, and the highest reading will determine what type of mitigation system will have to be designed for this parcel. Moving to the picture in the middle, what we see surrounding the sensing devices is a well casing. So right after the testing is completed, a steel plate identifying the well, you see back number 4, API 037-10507. That is a number given by the state agency. API, which stands for American Petroleum Institution, and the number is just mainly for this well. So this well number won't change. The date of the abandonment or the date of the placement of the steel plate is right at the bottom. So this steel plate will be welded tacked on the well, and it will be ready for a cone inspection. Before we move to another video that is showing the installation of the vent cone, city requires the installation of a concrete vent cone 4 feet in diameter and no less than 2 feet in height, capped with the lid, concrete lid, gasketed with an asphalt seal, asphalt material seal, and vented to the outside of the ground. If you see right in the middle, that pipe, PVC pipe, is labeled with the name of the well and the API number. Keep in mind this vent is temporary. It is just venting, waiting for any termination. It could be terminated horizontally. I mean, run horizontally to a termination to another location. So in the rough grading phase or process, that's where it takes place, and then it gets covered after the inspection is conducted and passed. So now with that, I like you to pay attention to the video and also the process that is done when putting the lid in the gasket. Now, with this in mind, we're gonna see that all the components should comply also with building and any other California codes. Go ahead and play the video. Now, this gentleman is putting a gasket over the vent cone. Inside the vent cone, we see what is required. It's a 3/4 crushed rock or drainage gravel. It took 3 men to put the cone on. So to put the vent on. So the lid is made out of concrete and very heavy. So once they place it on it, it will squish the gasket and will make a tight seal. Now, using approved materials, in this case plumbing materials, they are installing in a Schedule 40 ABS pipe with the approved cement for that type of material. And they are following the proper procedure, cleaning the pipe to remove any contaminants, any debris, any dust. So there is a tight seal when they place the pipe in the vent cone inlet.
Yeah, when I saw the green pipe, maybe that, oh yeah, could be compatible. But you know what? It's gonna work. There we go.
If they were to use PVC piping, they would have to get an approved cement for that type of connection. From here, David, we go back to you. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, David. I made a mistake. So I like to show in these pictures. On the picture on the left is the inside of a gymnasium. Salvation Army gymnasium. This parcel is in an oil site and a methane zone. So some of the wells will be some of the wells are outside of the footprint of the building. There is one that is in the inside in the office area. Now, after the completion of the structure, the contractor requested a final inspection. So during the final inspection, there are a few items to be inspected and requirements to conduct the final and approve the final inspection. As you can see on the right side, we see the inside of the gymnasium. Okay, now, but there are some methane venting systems going through some of the walls, inside the walls or outside the walls, venting to the outside of the building. Now, occasionally we'll see also venting systems for the vent cones that we saw, as an example, to flag poles. But for this building, most of the venting for the oil wells that are around underground and around that structure were vented through the outside exterior walls, except for the methane venting systems. If we move to the next slide, okay, now in this slide we're seeing at least three traits of construction. But on the picture on the left, there is a pipe with white signs on it, like every five feet increments. Can now run along to the what looks like a fire sprinkler stock or pipe. Can now, if any pipe of a venting system, methane venting system is run, it must be in an approved location, and the pipe vent must be identified with a design reading no electrical equipment or sparks within 10 feet, and cautioned there's methane in this pipe, or maybe methane in this pipe. And from there, I like to direct your attention to the picture in the middle. If we see this picture, not knowing what it is, we may not see anything. But during the inspection process, I see four systems interacting with each other. Again, any installation of the methane mitigation system must comply with plumbing code, electrical code, mechanical code, building code. And if you see the pipe or vent is terminated with an approved rain guard, that meets code for this vent riser, which is identified also with the type of system it belongs to. It says caution, and again, cautioned methane within this pipe normally, and no sparks or electrical equipment within 10 feet. So as we can see, there's a disconnect in the back. There's a mechanical unit right next to it on the right side. Now there's a penetration to the roof. So we see they've got to comply, this installation must comply with building code for penetration through the roof, and it must be sealed with an approved material right at the penetration or the roof jack. Seems to be like TPO or PVC roofing material. Now the other item that needs to be inspected and considered during the designing and installation process, it's air intakes. If there's any mechanical unit providing makeup air, it should be at least 10 feet away from those units, or from 10 feet away from any window within 10 feet, or pipe terminating 3 feet over a window. And from here, I'd like to direct now just the attention to the pipe on the right. And this vent is installed on the outside of the structure, which is anchored according to the plumbing code. Table 313.3. It should be supported any mechanical venting system should be supported horizontally and also vertically according to the plumbing code. Going back, I mean, with this, I go back to David, to the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Zeke. We're doing very good with timing for those of you who were listening to us, and my understanding is that you're sending us some chats. We will be answering those questions. But we are getting to the final slide. Thanks for the energy that Zeke and Jenna has given us to this point. This slide is a summary slide of what it takes and what we have spoken today about in about an hour and 20 minutes so far. Below well head mitigation. Going through the CalGEM standard, having them review, providing the WSLR form, they accept or deny the abandonment is mandatory for any process through the city. First, developers have to submit to CalGEM and receive this report, and they have to allocate time for this process because the state doesn't move very fast. One of the reasons that we were asked to develop the equivalent standard was the state was becoming very expensive projects, and projects did not pencil out because of the very rigorous process and bureaucratic system and everything else. Well, after the developer goes through that exercise and receives the form from the CalGEM, evaluation of well of existing condition will start with the city, and that requires looking at the plugs, profile of the well, where the plugs are, how good each plug is, those minimum 3 plugs that I mentioned. And if, let's say, 1 plug is in and 2 plugs are missing, or some more mitigation has to happen, that needs to happen, and that takes time. Evaluation of a well-read access is quite important. Let's say anything is done, but we don't have access to for the well for future eruption. That does not work with the city equivalency standards. So very early on, architects on site planning of their buildings, they need to be cognizant of the 50-100 rule that exists for the access to each well. Having all said and done, long-term safety evaluation and consideration is a big issue because Long Beach is built around several earthquake faults, and at any time, underground situation can happen. So the standards that Zeke was showing you, the detailing, the cone, the stands, and the effort and expenditure that the developer goes through are definitely must happen for it to have a safe building above or built in vicinity of the oils. Above well head mitigation by itself is a different process. There's a different fees involved because all inspectors have to go out there. Let's say a well is abandoned, but it's still leaking. Still not done. The project is not finished. So after the abandonment is done, the well leak testing needs to happen. Professional qualified engineer needs to certify the well, and after that is done, then the well cone, as the video showed, or the slides show, can happen. The certification by the qualified professional, I have mentioned it 2 or 3 times in this presentation, but for those consultant engineers and architects who are listening to this presentation from us, that is a must. That's expected and has to have to be so formally get submitted under signed, sealed stamp of a qualified professional engineer to the city for each well. Now let's say we have done all this, but nobody knows the future. Nobody knows what happens in the next 50, 100 years, 200 years in Long Beach. The city of Long Beach management, the city of Long Beach officials, including myself, we should have the good of the public and taxpayers in mind, and safety of the buildings and safety of the property owners and occupants of these buildings. As they change throughout years, we have always a bigger dilemma or bigger item to think about, and that's the unknowns. The only way city can entertain this equivalency standard is to have a deed restriction, a covenant, and indemnification agreement, 3 different documents that now, by the assistance of the city attorney office, have been combined into 1 document. It took us a while to figure all this out, but now City of Long Beach has a document that provides these deed restrictions on the property. It's a covenant that will notify the future owners about the property conditions, and an indemnification agreement that indemnifies taxpayers against any future liabilities filed or submitted during the life of the building and the property. This piece of item is signed, is prepared, is per the city attorney wording that they have spent a lot of time developing it. The developer signs it, submitted to my office. We run it by the city attorney office. When it's all blessed, all the signatures, all the dates, everything is good, then the developer runs that to the county and record it. The recordation come back to the city, and then city consent that this process was handled properly. That is the final umbrella over this whole process. With that, we have gone through 20 slides, have taken about an hour and 15 minutes of your time. Sorry for the little delays at the beginning, but we are now ready for any answer and questions that come in. Let me make sure that you have our email on this slide. If there's something that you want to communicate with us separately beyond this pre-training, you can provide that. But at this time, I'd like to open it to the public so we can hear you and also hear from our staff. Appended are 6 chat questions.
Yes, David, we have a question from Carlos Ovale. What is the difference between the new ordinance and what was built at the Laserfish project that was built prior to the ordinance? Does the age of the well affect the process or the type of cap used?
Excellent question. The Laserfish project came in as we were developing these policies. Now we have an ordinance. The way it works in every city, when a very comprehensive set of laws like this have to come in, they generally start with as a policy. We start grabbing, we start running towards that final document. And during that period, we don't call it the ordinance or we don't call it the law of the city. We call it the policy. My office holds a very firm on the policies. And Laserfish went through the policy that now is effective and became ordinance. So I can tell you the work that happened in Laserfish project is following very much what we are saying today. It started about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, when we didn't have a document to come and present to the public. We learned through that project and a similar project, and we basically took the best recommendations from a consultant that the city hired that worked with the city, pulling all that knowledge, and the document that you see in front of you, the ordinance and also the bulletin, has come about as a result of our expertise and experiences that we gained by studying cities around, agencies around, as well as projects that we experienced and went through. Now, the second part of the question was the cone, that standard cone, concrete cone that we came up with. The standard concrete cone that we have, we know it works and is perfect, but there were different type of detailing at the time, but they all arrived and reached the same reason, or they resulted the same. So you see a little bit different cone detail on that project because we were maturing up our own detail. I hope I answered the caller's question. Is there another segment to his question?
Okay, this is a question from Val Lerma. What well condition would trigger a well reabandonment rather than just leak testing and maintaining access to the well for future use. The city seems to allow the well to remain out of compliance with equivalency standards as long as it passes the leak test and access is maintained.
Very good question. Val is obviously an expert in the area, and she is one of our peer review consultants, so I expect that kind of question to come from an expert like you. Let me address that. We deal with each well as its own. Let's say if a project has several wells, we look at that site different than if the project has one well. So put that in perspective in the response that I'm providing you about. Now, if the well doesn't leak, and after rigorous testing by the developer, there is an indication that it's not leaking, we still have to go through the equivalency standard. The minimum 3 plugs have to come in. Remember, the equivalent standard calls for rig access, rigs for the minimum 3 plugs, and also calls for well not be leaking. The fact that the well is not leaking today doesn't mean the well is not going to leak 50 years or 10 years down the line. So we have to put that in perspective and work with companies like yours or other peer review companies that we have at this time to come up with that final recommendation.
This question is from Bojana Jaworski. Is a CalGEM CSWR application required for construction over an abandoned oil well?
Absolutely. Our equivalency standard, the first step is to submit to state. We don't want to bypass them. We want to make sure that we receive their expert opinion about each well. And that also helps the developer or the consultant who comes on board dealing with these wells. None of us have the history or background of these wells. Have been around for many years. Most recently, we were dealing with a project that there was actual case of a fire history on that well 20 years ago. So as I said, each well is different. We want to play conservative. Sorry if you hear me, some of the developers may not like to hear this from me, but we play very safe when in dealing with these wells for the future of the public knowledge.
All right, now we have another question from Carlos Ovale. What constitutes, quote, construction, close quote, over a well? For example, grading the site so that the final grade is substantially higher than the well cap and the original grade.
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Okay, what constitutes construction, quote, over a well? For example, grading the site so that the final grade is substantially higher than the well cap and the original grade.
Yeah, let me answer that. Maybe a combination of both myself and Zeke, we can chime into that. Zeke, you want to answer the question first?
Thank you, David. So, Section 18.78.010 quotes, all construction activities on a privately owned parcel or any tract or parcel containing an abandoned oil well or wells shall meet requirements of this chapter. Now with that, and also with 18.78.040, it reads, applicant shall complete the following prerequisite items prior to applying for a grading or building permit for construction within the project boundary. So, reading or based on these quotes, what is considered construction, even grading over an oil well?
Let me also chime in here. When the well is abandoned and there's a cone in it, we want 10 feet dirt over, not more than that. We don't want the well to be very, very deep. CalGEM requires the well to be raised if it's too low. And we run into all these scenarios in the field. Some wells will be left 30 feet deep. Some wells sometimes intentionally they were left so deep, so nobody can find them. But it is obligatory for the developer to identify and find the well. Sometimes it takes a lot of grading to find the well. That well must be found. Let me put it that way. Then the state standard says the well cannot be too deep because we want to do something, improve something, rather than again hiding it down there. So I have noticed architects creatively work with the grading over an existing well. If the well is too high, they may raise the grade some places in their design. If the well is too low, they may lower the grade in that area accordingly, or create planters or some creative architectural work to meet the intent of the 10-foot deep well. Hopefully we answered the question between Zeke and I. Zeke referred to the code section and I gave you the actual pragmatics of site design.
Okay, now this question is from Tom Walker. What criteria does Long Beach use to determine if access to a previously abandoned well has been maintained?
Another question from another expert. I like that. During last 2 years, I had to work with some of these individuals, Zeke and I. So thank you, Tom, for asking that question. I think that is a good, valid question for the rest of the audience or participant as well. Rig access is a CalGEM standard, 10-10-50 rule, I believe. We want to make sure the three-dimensional space is open for rig access. That's our preference. And when I say three-dimensional, we showed you a big crane that sits over the well and needs to have that kind of clearance to be able to get to the well. We also showed you a scenario that there are special rigs that can climb on top of a parking structure. They're very heavy, but the parking structures also can handle heavy load of equipment. By making the blockouts in the parking structure slab, they can address or get to the well. We also have special rigs that some creative developers are starting to demonstrate or show that they can horizontally access and they don't need as much headroom clearance to get to the top of the well and do the work of the future well maintenance. So we've been accepting all those three scenarios in the city as long as the certified engineer behind the job provides us that, yeah, such equipment exists and can work for their scenario. Tom, I hope I answered your question. Oh, I hope we answered your question.
All right, and now we have a question from Dave Shukla. Dave is asking, how does monitoring data on abandonment, leaks, and compliance testing get recorded and reported for statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventories, along with City of Long Beach and Ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles climate plans?
Great. Any project that comes to the city with these details will have to go through a planning process and AQMD notification and has to meet the environmental quality and either go through the negative mitigated deck or any EIR process. So regardless of building getting built near the well or far away from the well, that element of meeting the state code does not change. We are living a situation better than it was before. We expect the developers, when they certify their job, to have met all the state code requirements, including greenhouse gas, air quality, and environmental impact reports of the project. So let me answer this question by saying, when a project size of a major project gets submitted, they will go through the planning process first. This abandoned process, one of the reasons we highly encourage to start very early on, there are elements that we solicit, we gain from different bureaus and different departments in order for us to approve the project. We just don't approve a project based on one department of operations. So to answer that question, yes, that they have different planning and different bureaus that they look into the environmental aspects of any project. Meeting environmental aspects of a project also is an obligation on a developer. And the goal is to deliver a better project than existing or before. Okay, at this time we have answered all the chat questions, and I'm hoping that we can open this to our audience so we can hear from you. Is that possible? And please don't try to be bashful. If you have any questions, we'll do answer, and if you cannot answer them, we will find our answer for your question. I know you've been patiently listening to us, so we hope to listen to you. Well, we will be still around. I'm hoping that to receive more chats from you.
David, the audience can know that if they'd like to speak, we will unmute you. So let us know if you would like to speak. We will unmute you here.
Okay, yeah, we'd like them to speak. So.
This is Val. I just wanted to make a comment, if I may.
Well, we will have another presentation that comes up shortly for us. That starts at 10 o'clock. And that is the methane and gas mitigation presentation. That's the presentation that you've been kindly waiting to hear from us. It works in tandem with the oil well. We know that we have an interesting package to discuss methane gas, and it's really difficult to decipher the two from each other. You can't do a project with the oil well in the city and not be aware of the methane policies and ordinance. So I highly encourage, if you have time to continue with this presentation, you do not have to leave this presentation. You can stay on the same video call. You can take your break, and we start sharply at 10 o'clock. And that would be a conversation about methane